What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and today we're back with another regular Friday stream in the System Crafters live series. And we're going to be talking about something very interesting today, but until then, we're going to wait until people show up, and then we'll just chat a little bit first. Oh, hold on a second. I think I got... Where is it happening? I've got another instance of... My stream is playing on my phone. That's interesting. Okay. I don't know why I started playing automatically. I must have been waiting for my own stream. All right, here we go. All right, so I want to say hello to GNU Ninja, Daigo, Pavel, Appenzel, Ronnie, John. Thank you all for being here today. It's the second time I'm streaming in my more like reduced setup at my wife's parents' house. So, you know, I'm just waiting for the moment when everything just blows up or like my green screen backdrop falls down or something fun like that. So hopefully that's not going to happen today. Hello, Vladislav, Dennis, Thomas, Rodney, Robert, Minas Mazar, Dennis, Andreas. What's up, everybody? Nice to see you. I keep looking at my other screen because the YouTube chat's a little bit more reliable there. So, I've already got the topic on the screen. I blew it. So anyway, let's see. Anything interesting this week? I did not get the video out that I intended to get out this week. Still, like, just a lot of stuff that we're taking care of here after the move, you know, trying to find a house, trying to get, you know, established and whatnot. So I did not manage to get that done. And frankly, I haven't really been spending as much time thinking about Emacs because I've been busy with work and all this other stuff. So it's been harder to have the focus to produce a video. So I'm trying to keep the live streams going just so that we can have like a normal point for our weekly conversations, which is great. Ronnie says the video does freeze a bit. Yeah, I don't know, like the upstream bandwidth is a little bit flaky here. It's weird because I did a speed test like 20 minutes before the stream started, and it was fine. Everything was stable, but then I did a speed test right before I started the stream, and it was really flaky. So I'm getting some orange, red boxes here in OBS, so I think that we're just losing frames here and there, so hopefully it's not going to be too disruptive. Dennis says, I have a question already for macOS. Which distro would you go with? You mean Emacs distribution? I don't know. I mean, try them all and see what you like. Doom Emacs is a good starting point, but try them all. I mean, there's really no reason not to. It costs you nothing, and also it doesn't really give you much extra work. So try them all. And then also try to make your own configuration, which is fun in its own way. Hey, Crazy Chicken, Ned, Alan, Palatinus, Rostislav. So let's see, anything else interesting? Not really. I really want to get back into messing with my Geeks Home config, but I haven't had time. That's probably the next thing I'll be focusing on. Crazy Chicken says, no reason not to, especially with Emacs. Yeah, with Emacs, you can definitely try multiple Emacs distributions plus your own custom config all at the same time. And you can even run them at the same time, literally, like 2 Emacs sessions separately with different configurations. So it's a good way to experiment with them side by side and see which one you like better. Hey, West. All right. So the point of today's stream is to talk about popularity. This is a topic that keeps coming up every year or two, maybe even more frequently than every year or two, specifically around Emacs, where people are concerned that Emacs is not popular enough. So today what we're going to talk about is whether popularity actually matters and then what actually happens when an editor starts to lose popularity, because there's this fear of a lack of popularity. So what does it really mean if Emacs is not popular enough? So this conversation recently showed up again because there was an article written in 2020 called "Making Emacs Popular Again," which basically chronicles some discussions that were happening on the Emacs the development mailing list, basically for Emacs. And there's a lot of conversations about different things to help make Emacs more popular, and maybe the things that are holding Emacs back from reaching more people, etc. I'm not going to read this to you. We're not really going to look at it other than just to point out that it exists in case you want to go read it yourself. But it's a lot of the same old stuff. And recently there was a Hacker News discussion where somebody posted that same link again and people were talking about it. So this just keeps coming up again and again. And I've said multiple times on this channel that I personally don't think that popularity matters that much for Emacs, but in an effort to dig into this a little bit more deeply and to understand what popularity really means and what the loss of popularity can mean, we're going to talk about that. And what I really want to have is your feedback while we're going through all of this, your ideas and your feedback, because I want to sort of compile some information about this, partially because I'm going to use some of this information as part of my Emacs Conf presentation, which I'm going to try to record this weekend. So any ideas you have are very welcome toward that end. So let's see. Malcolm says, are you going to make more videos on making org mode websites? Yes, that's the series that's currently going on. Crazy Chicken, if popularity mattered, Emacs would have fallen ages ago. It's older than me twofold. Yeah, that's definitely one aspect. Hey, Takakuli. Srinivas says, I have two things to say. Closure refactoring and closure jack-in. Emacs seems to be much easier to set up. Lisp is decidedly better than Vim script. Sure. Popular piece of software is more likely to be developed. We can talk about that. Let's see. Dennis says, I'm going through your Emacs from scratch videos. What is meant is which base should I build on? Is it the same answer? Just try them all. Well, if you go through Emacs from scratch, we don't build on one of those. We build from scratch. So it's up to you to decide how you want to do it. If you want to go from scratch, follow the Emacs from scratch videos. But otherwise, you could try Doom or Spacemacs, but you're using a pre-configured Emacs at that point. So unless you're talking about like the different builds of Emacs for Mac OS, because there's like Aqua Emacs or whatever it's called, Aquamax, and then there's like normal GNU Emacs, use GNU Emacs. All right, so the goal of the conversation we're going to have today is that we're going to try to answer the following questions. First of all, which text editors have actually been popular within the last 10 to 15 years? Don't start answering yet. We're going to get to these individually. We're also going to answer what are some examples of editors losing popularity and why did it happen? Also, what happens when an editor loses popularity? And this could be, actual things that happened, or maybe our theories on what can happen. And the last one is how much popularity is enough to keep an editor alive. So let's talk about these individually. Let's not go into that just yet, because I want to be able to capture all the things that we're talking about individually on these questions. Let's see. All right. Hey, Millionaire. So, first of all, which text editors have been popular in the last 10 to 15 years? Now, I've tried a lot of different text editors, but I don't know every single one that has been popular necessarily over time. But I'm going to start writing out the ones that I think have been actually popular, at least in the more recent memory. I mean, we could say, GNU Emacs has been popular. We can say that Vim or Neo Vim has been popular. You can say that maybe Sublime text has been popular. VS Code has been popular. Let's see, TextMate is a bit older, but it was definitely popular back in the days and everybody was coding Ruby. Hey, Gavin, nice to see you. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Adam, thanks, Seth. Let's see, what else? We're not talking about like Google Docs. We're talking about text editors that people are typically using for programming. Let's see, what else? Mjolnir says, is there going to be a quiz later on? I'm the one taking notes, don't worry. Ed, I don't know that I would classify Ed as a popular text editor. BB Edit, that's not a text editor, that's a forum program, right? Unless I'm mistaken. I guess you could say that Notepad++ is one of them. I don't know how popular that is. Oh, BB Edit is actually a program on Apple or on Mac. I don't know that it really qualifies, but I will put it for now. Ed is a standard Unix text editor. Yeah, but do you see people going on Reddit saying Ed is the greatest editor ever? I'm talking about editors that people actually would go and like promote to other people because they thought it was so good. Geany is probably a little bit niche. Ultra Edit, maybe. Nano, I mean, okay, people use Nano, but who says it's their favorite editor? Jared says IntelliJ. Yeah, I would say IntelliJ, or at least the JetBrains editors. They're all basically the same editor, just with different IDs built in. Lighttable, yeah, Lighttable was certainly something that was popular, but it sort of died out pretty fast, but we'll put it here. Let's see. Yeah, Notepad++. I do know some people who use Notepad++ for like actual day-to-day work, and it kind of surprises me. Let's see. SciTE, mostly for those who code in AHK. I don't know how popular that is. Eclipse. Yeah, I don't know. Was Eclipse ever popular, or was it just necessary to use because of the Java ecosystem? Let's see. Yeah, so Number says, useful to note that many people are using an IDE rather than a text editor. That's true, but I would say that VS Code sort of falls more into the line of text editor with IDE functionality rather than something that's meant to be an IDE straight up. Like Visual Studio, the big Visual Studio, I would call that an IDE and not a text editor. Sublime, Atom, VS Code, Node++, Visual Studio, NetBeans. Was NetBeans that popular? VI should be among Vim and NeoVim. Do people use plain VI anymore? JEdit. Let's see. BBEdit versus Emacs was a conversation. Let's see. Pavel says, I've seen a couple of posts on our command line which says Ed is the greatest editor. Well, people are looking for, you know, things to get excited about, I think. Kakune, yeah, maybe. Code blocks, maybe. I'm just gonna write some of these down because why not? Code blocks. Does it have one or two colons in it? Yeah, I would not add Xyle and NG to this list. JetBrains editors definitely count as IDEs. They're sort of on the edge of what we're talking about here. Micro Emacs, yeah, were those ever popular? Kdevelop, well, Kdevelop, I don't say it was popular. Visual Studio is hugely popular, or are you talking about Visual Studio? Visual Studio, that's just an IDE. All right, so we've got a list here, and part of the reason for compiling this list is to look at some of these and try to figure out what happened over time. David says, just finished Worth TGIF. Yeah, it's nice. So we're going to try to figure out, like, you know, for some of these, you know, they were popular at some point, maybe not so popular now. Many of these are still used, but they're not popular. So we want to see what made them lose popularity and whether it had any negative effects on them. Crazy Chicken says a lot of these are IDEs. Well, it depends on which ones you're talking about. I mean, let's separate the list a little bit. Lighttable. What would you consider Lighttable an IDE? I mean, maybe, because it's very focused on dynamic editing of closure. Let's see, BBEdit. Like I said before, VS Code is technically an IDE, but I would also consider it a text editor. Mainly because it is one of the more popular things right now, so it's worth, you know, having it in the list. WordPerfect 5.1, yeah, that's I probably use that one actually. Okay, so these are a pretty good set. A lot of these are ones that I had in mind. Yeah, Nano is de facto editor, but that doesn't mean it's popular. It just means that people use it because they don't have another editor installed yet. MC Edit, I don't know that I've ever heard of that one actually. Bluefish, don't know. Some of these, I know they're probably like Linux text editors, but they are not popular. I mean, like, if you don't hear people talking about them, I'm talking about like popular editors where it's sort of, you know, people know about it. It's pretty well known in the, at least in the software development world. Because that's what we're talking about. When people are saying Emacs needs to be more popular, they're talking about, like in the ranks of everything else that we're mentioning here. All right. Joe editor, also not popular. I mean, I'm not, and I'm also not disparaging any of these editors whenever I say they're not popular. I'm just saying that they're not household name. They're not, they're not something that you hear about very frequently. MC Edit build is the built-in editor in Midnight Commander. Midnight Commander is a classic tool, but I wouldn't say that it's a popular editor. I mean, probably it was popular, 25, 30 years ago. I'm sure you can still use it now, though. Wasn't Bluefish mostly used for HTML? Don't know. NetBeans is an IDE, right? We can put NetBeans here. All right, so considering GNOME is popular, but is anybody going around saying gedit is the best editor ever? I don't think so. That's the thing. Like, the editor that you bring up, it should be something where people are going around saying this is the best editor ever. And a lot of these are not that, basically. Even some of these like NetBeans, I don't know that anybody ever went around saying that NetBeans is the best editor ever, unless you're specifically developing Java. Okay, so some examples of editors losing popularity and why did it happen? So let's think about which one of these may have lost popularity. I would say that Sublime Text definitely lost popularity over time. It's still used a lot. People use it quite frequently, but there was a time when Sublime Text was the go-to editor, and it's not anymore because VS Code came along and other stuff is around as well. So we definitely want to check out this one. What I want to try to do is go find some information or find some theories online about why these things lost popularity. So let's add an X here maybe, or actually let's do this. Let's add a checkbox. I mean, we could also say the same thing about GNU Emacs and Vim, NeoVim, but NeoVim is probably the reason why Vim would be losing some popularity, but they're sort of, I would say that Vim doesn't really lose popularity so much because it's always something that people are going back to. VS Code, I would say, is probably the most popular right now, so we don't need to look into that one. In fact, we can move it down to the bottom. TextMate certainly is something that people don't use much anymore. Atom, I would venture to say people don't use as much. Notepad++, I don't really have enough of a sense. Oh, Block says brackets. Yeah, I would add brackets to the list. Because that one was around for a little while before it got eaten by other similar editors. So Notepad++, I still think Notepad++ is edited or is used, but I would like to take a look at maybe Google Trends and see whether people are searching for it as much as they may have been in the past. Emacs, yeah, we could talk about that. But it's sort of orthogonal to the point here, I think, because it sort of falls within the Emacs territory. BB Edit, we can take a look at that one. I'm not sure exactly what the situation would be. And the rest of these we might look into later, but for now we're going to stick with the following few. And maybe I will move these closer to the end because we're really looking for editors that have, well, okay, let's do this. Faded to the extent that they're not really used as much anymore. So let's go to Google Trends. Rostislav says, Vim rescues me when I screw up my Spacemacs. Yeah, I use Vim from time to time for sure, for various different purposes. All right, so let's see. Search a term or topic. GNU Emacs, or maybe I should just say Emacs. Emacs topic. So the nice thing about Google Trends, it will tell you the interest over time. And what we want to see is maybe the last, let's say 2004 to the present. So interest over time, it seems to have been much higher in 2004 versus now, which is a very interesting graph to look at. I wonder how you can sort of interpret this. Is it just that there's more stuff going on in the world so that there's more, the data is more diffuse, or is it that actually people are searching for this less over time? Vitaly says the Xi editor was written in Rust, but I'm not sure it was popular. Well, it was promising, but I don't think it would ever became a primary editor because it was still pretty experimental. So according to this graph, Emacs has been getting less popular over time. Let's actually check about Vim as well. Can I add something to this? Compare. Okay, how about that? Vim. Come on. Vim top. No, not that. What? Vim text editor. How can they tell the difference between a topic and a text editor? Yeah, so if you look at the comparison here, it definitely looks like the searches for Vim have been, excuse me. Yeah, I'm not sure how they decide this. It seems the same, actually. Emacs list programming language, cool. But it seems that people search for Vim more over time, or at least that's the volume of searches on Google. Now, that doesn't mean that Vim is more popular per se, it just means that more people are searching for it. So you could say that Vim is harder to use. No, I'm just kidding. So it is sort of a useful metric. In fact, we could probably drop some more of these things in this list, depending on how many it lets us put in. So how about TextMate? Comparison contains both search terms and topics which are measured differently. So I would like to make this a topic, but I'm not seeing a topic in this list. Okay, I think it's considering a topic. So Emacs was always more than TextMate, it seems, but the popularity started to die off, you know, around 2012 timeframe, and I would want to bet that's probably when Sublime Text came around, because I think Sublime Text was the big competitor, as well as Atom at some point came into the mix. So, all right, check out the graph of Sublime Text. It's sort of like, it was pretty good, and then started dipping down, and then resurged again. I wonder if this is around the point when like Sublime Text 3.0 came out, but we'd have to take a look at that. I could be wrong. And then started fading again, and I think VS Code came out around 2015, 2016 timeframe, so there was definitely a decline at that point. Whoops. Let's see, topic. Is it gonna give me the graph? Okay, yeah, and then VS Code just basically skyrockets after everything else at the end. It's getting a little bit difficult to view all this, but it's good to take a look. Emacs is a Lisp interpreter. Yeah, well, that is sort of the point, is that it's harder to customize only because you have more work to do. You're writing a program, basically. They don't give me any ability to do more? Probably not. Okay, well, this is a good enough starting point, I think. Let me actually see if I can copy the link for this. Hopefully it's replicable. Let me paste it and see if it... No. That's... yes. Okay. Cool. So I think that link will actually bring that back. So let's put this in here. So I'll paste that link. Compare Emacs, Vim, TextMate, Sublime Text, VS Code. All right. Check the world, not just US. Oh, okay. Thank you. That's a good point. Let's take a look at that. United States? No, we want the whole world. So worldwide. I wonder how different the graph would be. Takes a while. Yeah, even more shocking of a graph for Emacs because it sort of just peters out here towards the end. But it was the most popular back in 2004. So that's kind of an interesting story to tell, I guess. So, and then even at that point, Sublime Text got more popular than Vim before VS Code came around, and then the graph starts switching directions. Okay, so that's pretty useful. What other editors do we want to throw into the mix here? So maybe we can look at Atom. So I'll take TextMate out and Sublime Text out, maybe. Or no, let's leave that out. We'll put Atom in. if it lets me type. Come on. Okay, Atom topic. Whoa, what am I looking at? Okay, so I think that it's not thinking of Atom, the text editor. It's thinking of something else, because I cannot be right. Atom text editor. How about that? Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, so Atom, where is Atom in this list? Okay, it's the purple one now. So Atom was still pretty like below Sublime text, kind of crossed the line at some point. Then Sublime text kind of blew up, if I'm looking at that right. Then let's see. Should I try to fix this? How about Emacs text editor? Search term, text editor. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting it to search the right things, because we don't want it to do unexpected stuff. So we can make some kind of, you know, quasi-scientific inferences from this. Also, if we take out, let's take out VS Code. I mean, we already know the story on that. So how about brackets? Whoops, that's not right. System software? No. Yeah, this is gonna be hard. Brackets text editor. Brackets editor. Yeah, not sure the right approach to that one. Which one is brackets? Brackets is green. Yeah, it's flat. We'll put this in, but I'm pretty sure that topic is going to end up... Whoops, that's bracket. Brackets. Come on. With an S, please. Thank you. System software, who knows? Let's try that and see what it does. Still pretty low. I don't think brackets was ever super popular to begin with, but it was sort of the one that kicked off the idea of having a web-based text editor, I think. And then Atom came along and kind of ran with that idea. So hard to tell from this, but we can try to look it up a little bit. Yeah, Thomas says Notepad++. Let's take a look at that one and watch it be more than anything else. Plain old Notepad, not interesting enough. Okay, so Notepad++ still is like the lowest here, but I think it's just got a very diehard following that isn't very large. Search terms and topics which are measured differently. Okay, fine. So if you do it as a search term, it actually shows up higher than some of the other stuff. So I don't know exactly how they measure topics versus search terms. Excuse me. BB edit. Let's take a look at that one. That's a search term. Let's go to software. Notepad QQ. What is that? BB edit's pretty low also. We can take a look at the search term and see if it's any better. Pavel asks, is Emacs more popular in China? That's an interesting question. Yeah, BB edit's pretty low. I mean, they had some stuff going here, it seems, in 2004, but then sort of just dropped off the map, it seems. Let's check out China. Kind of interested in the answer to that question. So, no. Wow. Okay, probably they don't have data from that far back, or not as much data from that far back, for various reasons. So it seems that Vim is the reigning king in China, and Sublime Text also is not too far behind. Interesting. So let's see, we'll go back to worldwide here. All right, so this sort of just gives us a sense of what people have been searching for over time, but that doesn't tell us any stories. It just tells us, you know, basically search volume on Google, which is a fairly narrow piece of information, I would say. Let's see, what else am I missing here from the chat? Andrew says, after personal utility, what I care about is how much support there is from the community. I don't care how many people like or use it. I care how many people help develop it. Yep. Thomas says, I get playback error. Is the stream still live? Yeah, but it may just be that sometimes it drops frames to the point where your player thinks it's stopped. According to YouTube, I have an excellent connection, which I doubt is the case, but let me see. Yeah, it's green here for me, so. All right. Are we missing code from the graph for a reason? Yeah, because we took it out to look at others. Apparently, you can only put 5 at a time. Vim versus NeoVim. Let's take a look at that real quick, out of curiosity. I mean, probably you're going to see a lot more NeoVim because it's, you know, a bit more active at the moment. Remove. Hello. Who knows what's going on here? All right, so edit NeoVim. Software. That can't be so low. Doesn't make any sense. So let's see about search term. Actually, I've capitalized it incorrectly. gedit. Let's check out gedit. I don't expect to see much there. Yeah, even NeoVim, for some reason, is pretty low, which surprises me. But maybe it's just that Vim is so much more popular that NeoVim doesn't show up as much. And it also could be that the NeoVim topic results are too mixed in with the Vim topic results that it's hard to distinguish them. Let's say gedit. User base of Vim versus user base of Emacs. Well, we don't really know the answer to that question. Yeah, gedit is, you know, pretty low. What was another one people said? Guinea. Is that right? Yeah, Guinea is a text editor. Geary is the email client. It's hard to know the difference sometimes. Okay. So we've seen about all we really need to see here, I think. Matthew says, are you saying Vim requires you to search for help more often? I was joking when I implied that. Okay. Ed, I wonder if it even will find out that this is a text editor. Ed. I mean, the name is so short and generic, there's no way. Ed text editor. Type of no. Yeah, it's not going to show up. Pavel says, most likely people who use NeoVim just Google Vim 95% of the time. Yeah, that's true. Which reminds me. Pavel, I added you as a mod. Matthew, I'm going to add you as a mod also. Now that I remember, and I have a chat box open on the other screen. Okay, so let's see here. So let's do a little bit of different type of searching now. Respect to Taco says Kakune. Let's take a look at it really quick. Oh, the yearly poll from Stack Overflow. That's actually also a good place to look. So Stack Overflow, what do they call that? The survey? Oh, and let me go back to this and put in, oops, I need to put the right topic here. Kakune, whatever it is. Oh, Astrocat's here. Hey, Astrocat. Okay, search term. Yeah, whatever. So yellow, it's just like flatlined, basically, which is pretty surprising because I would imagine somebody had searched for that at some point. There's another niche one. Let me put in here. 4Coder. I don't know if anybody's heard about that one. It's kind of popular in the handmade software community. Okay, so that's flatlined too. All right, developer survey. I wish they had a way to aggregate the results over the years, but maybe they do if we just look at the current year survey. So, technology, or is it developer profile? Most popular technologies, databases, cloud platforms. Can I get like a overview? Can I just search for Emacs? Here we go. So Notepad++, surprisingly in number 3. IntelliJ, Vim, let's see, a bunch of other IDEs, Atom. Atom is higher than Emacs still, which is pretty surprising. And then TextMate still exists at the very bottom of the list. Acme, I don't know about that one. Slant that compares various software. I don't think Slant, is Slant automated? It seems like it's sort of like they scrape that information and it's not necessarily that accurate, but maybe I'm wrong about that. So this is pretty helpful as an indicator. So maybe I should copy the link of, wait, can I get a link to this? IDE, there we go. Let's copy that, drop it in here. SO 2021 to IDE results. Maybe I should just spell that out so it's not so vague. Whoops. I just said that twice. Stack Overflow. There we go. Okay, so what we got here? I found Atom slow. It's usually user options. Okay, so what have we learned so far? Well, not a whole lot, because the numbers in Google Trends seem to conflict with what other people are actually saying. So maybe it's the fact that people who use a particular editor may be comfortable enough they don't have to Google for it so much, because it seems that there's at least, you know, the respondents of this survey seem to indicate that Atom is still more popular than Emacs in this case, and that Sublime Text is more popular than Atom, which honestly doesn't surprise me too much. And I really don't understand the Notepad++ thing here, but apparently people use it pretty often. But this is also people's response to a survey. I don't know if you can select multiple or if you can only select one at the given time. Professional developers, let's see, what's the difference? If you say professional developers, IntelliJ moves up to number 3. And everything else is pretty similar, it seems. Srinivas, I would not expect Emacs to be much higher, mainly because there's a lot of developers in the world, and I would say not many of them have the patience to learn Emacs well enough to use it for day-to-day work, especially because traditionally it's been very difficult to set up IDE-like functionality for, you know, the work that a developer needs to do at their job. So I think often people would rather reach for an IDE or at least a text editor that has a better out-of-the-box configuration story. Now, Vim is obviously the outlier here, but I think the difference is that there's probably a large number of people who use Vim without actually customizing it that much, because you just, you know, run Vim on some text file, you just do a bunch of editing, and it's just another tool in the toolbox rather than a more comprehensive environment for most people, I would say. AstroCat says, Notepad++ is pretty nice. I use it for a long time over my Windows PC and still do for quick editing. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Pavel says Stack Overflow may have a very different slice of audience in comparison to Google. That's definitely true. Hey, Martin, thanks. Let's see. Crazy Chicken says, honestly surprised Emacs is on the list at all. There's enough people out there who like Emacs. I think it makes sense that it's on the list. Okay. AstroCat says, more and more tutorial videos I see are using Visual Studio Code, or one of the Python was like PyCharm. I still use Emacs when I follow along. Yeah, well, I mean, VS Code has a lot better integration with a lot of stuff through its extensions and whatnot. So I think people tend to focus on that one because it's, you know, pretty common for people to be using it these days because of its popularity. And that's sort of the point here, is that, you know, popularity sort of dictates how much coverage it gets and how commonly it shows up in educational material, I think. Pavel says, I vaguely remember that some researchers had trouble with Google Trends changing their methodology, meaning they changed how they process their data over time or something, maybe? Peter says, some people might answer Vim while using something else. Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me, because I think if you want to say that you're a cool developer, you're a super hacker, maybe you say you want to use like terminal Vim instead of using some other program because you know, secretly deep down you want to say that you are a hardcore Vim user whenever you actually do use something else every day. Because obviously only the most hardcore people use Vim. But as we've seen in the chat so far, really the hardcore people are out there using Ed, or you know, echoing directly into files. So let's ask some actual questions here. How did TextMate lose popularity? Did anybody ask this question and have it answered? Matthew says, internet cred, yo. Absolutely. The era of Visual Studio Code. Okay. TextMate news. That's not going to help. Wow. Introduction to the Zettelkasten method. How did we come to this from a TextMate search? That's very interesting. Okay, we can look at this first blog post by Robin Clean, if I'm pronouncing their name correctly. Longevity. Okay. So someone else is talking about the case for VS Code's longevity. Okay, we'll have to contrast against this one in my Emacs Conf talk, probably. Ah, here's an interesting chart. Where's it coming from? Stack Overflow started allowing multiple answers between 2015 and 2016. Well, this is an interesting graph. So Emacs always was a little bit flat in this graph. VS Code raised higher as expected. Vim sort of stayed a bit higher and crossed over Sublime Text at some point. And then Atom is in the middle. But then started fading after VS Code started reaching a lot more popularity, it seems. Astrocat says maybe DuckDuckGo is remembering queries from your IP. I would hope not, because that's sort of the point. They're not supposed to do that. So let's actually drop this in as another source. Whoops. Let's see. Jared says, at my last job, basically the only way to develop was with IntelliJ, but that time I definitely preferred Vim. Yes, I mean, a lot of times if you can only use an IDE, sometimes Vim is a better option. If you can't install Emacs also. Martin says, I also remember Sweet. Oh, Site. How do you pronounce that? SCITE. Yeah, I remember that, but I never used it. Martin says, I'm still using Ultra Edit. That's another one that I heard about but never used. All right, so text editor as platform. Wow, this got a nice little timeline here. I might have to take some thoughts from this one. Trying to see if there's any high-level insights. So TextMate. While TextMate popularized the concept of a text editor built around extensions, in hindsight, it didn't go far enough. TextMate's extensions had limitations that later text editors would thrive by removing. That's actually a pretty good point. I think TextMate was pretty simple. I mean, you could do custom syntax definitions, snippets, and things of that nature, but I don't think they allowed you to actually write code to customize the editor. However, TextMate was kind of revolutionary in what they created, because as you might notice if you have paid attention to Sublime Text or Atom or VS Code, the TextMate syntax coloring format with the regular expressions that it uses has been pretty much used in all of the more recent editors over time. Now, there's been variations on that idea, but TextMate grammars are pretty standard in text editors these days. Obviously not in an Emacs. There may be a plugin you can use that can convert a TextMate grammar into like font locking, but for other editors, it's very common to see TextMate grammars for syntax highlighting and themes and whatnot. So yeah, it sounds like one theory for how TextMate became less popular over time is that other editors came along that were more extensible. So maybe I can put another little section below here for the sort of subpoint. So TextMate. Other more extensible and featureful editors came along despite TextMate being very influential. Yeah. Let's see. Jeff says, didn't TextMate lose popularity when it stopped being the cool kids editor for Ruby on Rails? I seem to recall some event that the main developer was unhappy with and he just dumped it and walked away. Well, that's also one of the things that I am interested to find out. If there is, like, if there were actual events like this that happened that caused like a mass exodus. So let's see, the main developer of Ruby. Let's see, Matt drops TextMate. If I'm using his name correctly, is it Matt's with an S or with a Z? Ruby creator. Or are you talking about David Hannemeyer Hansen? DHH drops TextMate. The missing editor for OS X, okay. Delivering on the hype, okay, so definitely he was helping to promote TextMate back in the day. Astercat says, wasn't Emacs around during that stuff way before 2004? Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Emacs was the popular editor doing it. Tomas says, TextMate didn't have UTF-8 support. Well, that could be a big deal for people who need to deal with that. I think Matt's used Emacs. I think that's right, actually. Hey, Christian. Then Sublime Text came out. Yeah, so also... Let me delete that a little bit. Yeah, I need to look into that a little bit and see if that may be part of what happened. BitKeeper lost popularity when Linus Torvalds walked away and invented Git. Yeah, things like that definitely happen. And that's sort of one of the points I want to make in the talk about Emacs, is that a lot of this has to do with not only new editors coming along and you know, editors with new features or whatever, but there's also fashion changing. You know, obviously people can make a new editor and then that causes the fashion to change, but it could just be a very influential person says, I'm going to use this thing instead, and that's enough to get many people to stop using it. Astrocat says, my dad said Emacs and Vi were the two main ones on Unix in the 80s and 90s. Well, they were. That's because desktop computer software was not very advanced, I would say, back then, and Emacs and Vi had existed well before any of the desktop software, because they were being used on terminals and you know, basically what you would consider ancient computers compared to desktop PCs in the 90s. Torvalds used Emacs, if you were not aware. Yeah, I think he uses like his own fork of micro Emacs now or something like that. All right, so another editor. Let's take a look at maybe we could quickly take a look at brackets. It may not be that interesting because I think that it's very likely that it just disappeared because of better stuff showing up. And I think brackets was very specifically geared towards HTML development. Let's see, brackets editor. I wonder if the Wikipedia page would be helpful for this. Obviously, it's still around, which kind of surprises me. I can't imagine they're actively developing it. Transition from Adobe to the brackets community. Yeah, they're like, here you go. You can just take it now and deal with it yourself. Adobe doesn't want to have it in their hands anymore. It was pretty cool back when it first came out, though. All right. Wikipedia? Is there no Wikipedia entry for that? Avocadora says, what do you mean by does editor popularity matter? That's what we're answering as a part of this this stream, because we don't have an actual full answer yet. We're trying to come to a conclusion, basically. Andrew says, you need the cool kids and core developers involved in a product. Then the topic becomes why the product solves core problems and then how it can be improved to do so. Yeah, well, definitely there's people who create the fashion. That's for sure. JH says, does HyperCard count as an IDE? Probably. Never used it, though. Seems pretty cool, though. All right, so discontinued source code editor. Let's see. Nothing really. Okay, history, maybe. Web development on Edge code. Contributions by more 282 community members. 16th most popular project on GitHub as of 2015. But no real analysis of what happened. But Adam is linked here, so maybe Adam's appearance is what happened. That's more or less my theory on that. Christian says, are we looking for popular niche editors? For Mac, there's TextMate is the hip thing, but BBEdit is the editor for ages. Yeah, sort of like that. I mean, really like any editor that you will hear people going and trying to tell other people to use on, you know, on forums and whatnot. Did we look at BB Edit in the trends list? Let's see. I think we did, right? And we didn't see much. BB Edit software. Yeah, it's low compared to the rest. And was more popular until about 2008. Avocadora says, intuitively, I think popularity matters in the sense that it's more likely the project will be kept alive. Yes, that's one of the points, but we'll get to that. All right, so let's also look at Sublime Text. And as we know, Sublime Text is still being used and still, fairly popular, but it isn't the most popular thing anymore. So why did Sublime Text lose popularity? Hey, Eric. BB Edit is like the Notepad++ for Mac. Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so we have the opposite side of things. Why is Sublime Text gaining popularity? That's kind of interesting way to look at things. When was this written, though? 2018. Okay. But was it really gaining popularity at the time that this was being written? I would doubt it. That's just one person's opinion there. What happened to the lead singer of Sublime? That's a totally different topic. Wow, okay. Why are we asking questions about the a very nasty group here? Why have all these other text editors? Why not Sublime Text or Vim? A lot of opinions here. We need more actual, well, I guess there's probably not as much analysis on text editor popularity out there as one would think. Christian says, couldn't we try these Google questions in a GPT-3 answering machine? I don't know. Is there a link to one? Tomas has a good point. There was quite some pause in maintaining Sublime Text, so then it has been picked up again because they also came out with the great Git client. Yeah, that did actually happen. So there were no new updates to Sublime Text. Was it 2? And then VS Code came along. I think that Sublime Text stayed pretty popular compared to Atom. So we can't really say that it was more popular than Atom, especially based on some of the charts we've looked at so far. What else? I guess we saw Notepad++ was pretty high, right? Or not? Or well, actually, it was high on the Stack Overflow developer survey. And there was that other blog post I was looking at too that had a graph that showed it be pretty high. Oh, actually, let's look at this one really quick. Even with Sublime Text expanded extensions, it still didn't go far enough. True. That's actually a good point. There was not a package manager built into Sublime Text, so it was harder to install packages. That's a good point. Let's see. Sublime Text 3 also stagnated for a long time. Okay. Let's see. What else do we want to look at? So, did he talk about Notepad++ here? They also mentioned BB Edit. Unlike those apps, it's not the most popular in its category by a wide margin. The reason seems to be, at least partially, that it never fully adapted to a world where text editors put so much emphasis on package-driven ecosystems. Well, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's still being used. BB Edit is still relevant today. Okay. Oh, it was in 1992. Wow, that's crazy. It's been around for a while. Pre-2004. So apparently 2004 is considered the point where there was a text editor renaissance. This may be right, though. I mean, this is probably the best distillation of text editor history that I've seen, at least for the most popular ones. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Nice article. Good analysis. Okay. So we also have Atom. And I know a couple things about this one since I worked on it. But I came very late in the game into that project, so. Okay, so the thing about Atom is that it was definitely the most extensible out of any of the quote-unquote modern editors, especially of the web variety, that anybody had seen so far, because you literally could change anything in the editor. The APIs are pretty deep. You could replace all of the built-in UI elements, and you could basically hack all aspects of the package code. And it did have a package manager that you could use to install new extensions from an official extension gallery. So because of that, it was, pretty good for people who wanted to have a customizable editor who maybe didn't really like the idea of Emacs or Vim because they thought maybe they wanted something that looked a little bit more attractive or modern, I suppose. Christian says the DHH video with TextMate is from 2 months ago. Did you paste a link? Sometimes these links get eaten immediately. Tomas says, Emacs also didn't have a built-in package manager for quite some time. I think that's true, yeah. Jeff says, I think Sublime Text is maintained by a single person. Yeah, I think that's probably a risk to that project. It's not open source. Single developer or small team, at least. And proprietary code, yeah. So that's a really good point. Andrew says the package extension pattern is powerful. Absolutely. I mean, if you want to have an editor that someone can mold to their liking, but also not have to do all the work themselves, then you need to have a package repository or a packaging system so that people can install extensions to the program. And people are saying that Atom had, too high memory usage. Yeah, Electron definitely has that effect sometimes. Camelo's asking if the stream is hanging for anyone else. I'd be curious to know the answer to that too. Hey, Nova. Okay. Onyx says, I only use Atom for a day and that was it. Tomas says, Tonsky of Fura Code font fame is still using Sublime Text for some cutting edge closure development. Yeah, I mean, Sublime Text is a pretty solid tool. I mean, as far as performance is concerned, and it had some pretty decent features, I think. Christian says, the link is above. I look for alpha preview modern JavaScript in Rails without Webpack. Wow, so he's still using TextMate after all these years? Surprising. Tomas says, Sublime Text Dev might have promised he will open source it if he can't maintain it anymore. Okay. All right, so for Atom, I would just say VS Code is the main reason, because they are fighting for basically the same territory. Because I would say that VS Code, at least at first when it came out, it was very web development focused, because the languages with the best support built into the editor were JavaScript and TypeScript. So Atom also was kind of more focused on web development, even though it could do plenty of other things as well. So, and they were also built with similar mentalities where you have this sort of web-based editor that wasn't really like, it felt like a full desktop application, but it was using web technologies. So I think it's purely the fact that VS Code showed up and did a lot of the same things better with more performance, possibly better memory usage. I'm not exactly sure the comparison between the two, but that's enough to be a reason to make people go away from it. And also, I think that, whenever something new shows up where there's a lot of hype building around it, it just starts to attract all the attention. And if it's good enough to warrant the hype to some degree, then people will stay with it and not go back to the previous thing. So Lots of hype after it was released, after VS Code was released. Let's just put this here. But that's mainly my opinion on that, because, I mean, you know, when VS Code came out, it was pretty, you know, it took a lot of attention away from other editors, period. Extension-based text editor has seemingly reached its final form. There just isn't anywhere else to go. The progressioning appears to have culminated. I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can say that VS Code is the pinnacle of a extension-based text editor, because it really depends on what you want from an extension-based text editor. The thing you can say that VS Code is doing well is isolating extensions from the main editor process to the extent that they can control the performance by making all extensions do things asynchronously, thus not blocking the main UI loop of the editor. So it continues to feel fast despite things that are actually happening in the background. However, I don't say that that's the only thing that matters when it comes to extensions, because obviously I use Emacs instead because I want to have more control over what happens in the editor and more sort of end-to-end workflow customization, which you cannot do in VS Code. Correspondingly, there isn't a way a new text editor can leapfrog VS Code the same way previous text editors have been leapfrogging each other by improving extensions. Well, that also assumes that extensions are the only way that you can leapfrog an editor. There's still more that can be done for performance, I think. You know, VS Code is hampered by the performance of Electron. So if you had, you know, a program that had natively rendered UI that did not have to go through the entire browser stack, then it's possible that you could have a better editor. And I know that there's people out there who've been working on things like that, like the Xi editor. I think that was one that had a different mentality about how an editor should be created. And also the experimental editor that some people on the Atom team were working on, called X-Ray, was another foray into the idea where you have a natively coded UI front end, graphical front end for like an editor core that was potentially even a separate process. So, you know, similar to how Emacs can operate, but I think Xi also had a similar model, if I'm not mistaken. So there's other ways that things can go, but really that comes down to like ultimate performance. And the question is, does ultimate performance actually give you better productivity as a developer? Well, I don't know. I mean, you can be pretty damn productive with Emacs, even though doesn't have the ultimate performance. So, yeah, I guess the question is there a way that an editor could just become light years better than what's already out there? I don't really know, but I'm not going to say that this is the final form of what an editor can be. Let's see. What am I missing here? Christian says TextMate is good. Well, yeah, TextMate is probably just fine, but, you know, it depends on what you want to use. Atom also was a primary target for Parinfer because it had the friendliest API amongst all the alternatives. Well, for some of the more modern ones, probably for sure. LSP did it for VS Code. Well, the thing about LSP is that it was not limited to just VS Code. I would say that, you know, LSP was one of the most important developments in IDE functionality that's happened in a very long time, because it basically made it available to everyone. So I think that was very important. Christian says, Xi is nuts. Rust backend powering a native front end. Yeah, that's like the next frontier, I think. But then how do you make that super configurable like the web-based editors? Because with Atom, at least, you can inject HTML and CSS to have custom UI. But if you have an editor that has its own natively rendered UI that's meant to be high performance, and it's probably not going to be using the native graphical libraries, the native user interface element libraries of the operating system. So they're going to have write their own entire UI set that's customizable. So you have a whole different set of problems for extensibility on that side of things. Tomas says VS Code is extremely performant lately. Yeah, that's mainly because all extensions are communicated with via asynchronous APIs. So they don't wait for an extension to come back with information. They wait for the async task to come back, which is really the right way to do it if you want to make sure that the main editor itself is fast and stable. Onyx says, at the end of the day, it matters how much an editor is customizable to be able to do what you want. Well, it depends on who you ask, I would say. Spilling water everywhere. Okay, so let's look. Is there anything else we wanted to look into? We got Adam here. So, we could ask the question why Emacs is losing popularity, or quote unquote losing popularity, but I would just say that Emacs has slided in popularity over time, probably just because there's more options showing up, and not everybody wants to deal with an editor that requires you to invest as much time as Emacs does. So I would just say that that's just it. More options appearing over time that are more appealing to different types of users. That's my opinion on that. I would also be welcome to hear other people's opinions. Okay, so we've been talking about that for about an hour, so let's move on to some of the other questions. What are some examples of editors losing popularity, and why did it happen? Well, actually, let's just copy this back down there, because I think that's what we were meaning to talk about. So let me just paste that. If anybody has other thoughts on that too, I can try to grab those and put them in. All right. Christian says, Zaya calls plugin code through, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, through RPC or XPC, so more like self-contained sub-programs. That is a good way to do it, if you can fork off a sub-process. And then, and then communicate with it that way, but it has to be asynchronous communication. It can't be, writing and waiting for a response. Andrew says, I think Emacs is losing popularity because traditional coding is losing popularity. Coding within the browser is a new thing. Well, that is possible, actually. That could be the one way that traditional editors get left behind to some degree, because browser-based coding is becoming more powerful just because things like VS Code have actually made it possible to use their functionality in a browser. So if new developers, like people who are learning to code, don't need to install a program on their computer, they can just go to a website and write code and actually develop it, test it, deploy it, etc. Then why have an editor on your computer? Christian says, is Emacs really losing popularity? Are there usage stats, for example? It's hard to say because, we don't really have like an official poll that gives us that information aside from like the Stack Overflow poll, and that may still be biased towards people who use Stack Overflow or people who, identify as professional developers. Christian says the 2020 knowledge management app renaissance seems to have invigorated Emacs for normies because of org. I agree with that completely. And I imagine that you've probably seen that quite a lot too, Christian, because you're, one of the co-authors of a Zettelkasten site, which is pretty hot right now as a topic. So yeah, definitely org mode. It has brought some attention back to Emacs because it does have a lot of flexibility for this type of thing. Let's see. Martin says, I think the auto formatters are much better in those big IDs like Eclipse. I think that the mentality has shifted though, because people have realized that it's better to have tools for things like formatting or linting, etc., that can be run in CI for checking the formatting of code before it gets merged or that kind of thing, such that functionality is being moved out of IDEs now into independent tools that can then be used by any program that can launch a process. So like Emacs can run really good code formatters with this just, standard functionality. So you don't really need to have, you don't really need to have an IDE anymore to do things really well like formatting. Nova says, using Doom Emacs has made me learn Vim, which makes it easier to use Vim whenever I need to edit something on my Arch machine. Yeah, for sure. Vedant says, Emacs may be losing popularity because people don't want to spend hours on editing Lisp configs. I don't know that. So the type of person who would want to actually use Emacs the right way has to get through the initial experience of using Emacs to get to that point. I think that a person probably doesn't use Emacs long enough to get to that point if they look at, excuse me, Emacs itself and are kind of confused as to why somebody would use it. Like if you run Emacs out of the box and you see that white screen with the kind of old looking icons, I think many people just don't even bother to get that far. So I think the people who have gone through that process to the point of trying to configure Emacs, or at least learn more about it, probably are not scared away by Emacs Lisp configuration. But I could be wrong about that. Todd says, I want to spend hours editing eLisp configs. Yes, I think many of us who are here right now fall into that category. All right. Well, Lisp is losing popularity. I don't think that, well, okay. I mean, there is some connection between Lisp usage and Emacs usage, because Emacs is the most common IDE, quote unquote, that you would see for Lisp-based languages. I would say that Emacs is pretty commonly used for Clojure and obviously for Scheme and Common Lisp. So there could be some connection there, but yeah, I'm not sure. Avocadora says, I think your reason Emacs is hard to get started with is the wording in the introduction needs improvement. Well, if that's true, that's something that could be fixed. Tomas says, external auto formatting is problematic when used from inside an editor because it's not trivial to maintain cursor position. Actually, that is true. There's a package called Affilea, I think, for Emacs that tries to help with that, but it isn't perfect. I was also using one for Prettier for JavaScript code before that really had problems with cursor positioning. I would be typing a line, and then I would save it, and then it would jump. The cursor would jump to the beginning of the line or something weird like that. But the other problem sometimes is your editor could like overwrite the contents of your buffer, which has happened to me quite often recently with the Affilea package. I should probably file an issue about that. But yeah, that's true. It's not perfect using it in an editor. GNU Ninja says web-based editors are probably going to be the future, which definitely raises the question, who's going to do the free software version of that? Because it's going to be needed. Skimakos says, I kind of wish we could auto-format the stylistic fafry out in Jenkins pipelines rather than have them fail and have to pull, reformat, commit, push again. Well, I mean, you could do that. You can automate auto-formatting for sure. It's just, it's not ideal for a PR workflow, probably. Vedant says, anyway, I love Emacs. Yeah. Well, that's why we're all here talking about it. Okay, so what happens when an editor loses popularity? We're not going to go too in-depth here. Well, I guess we have some time to go sort of in-depth. So what happens? Well, let's say less people contributing to the project, less people creating and maintaining community packages. Let's see, what else? How about trend 2? That's what I do. I do auto format on save, but depending on what you do with auto format on save, it still could have problems. Let's see. Also, less blog posts, videos, etc. Educating people on how to learn it. What else? Let's see, what other things can happen when an editor loses popularity? So what's happened to other editors? I mean, you know, not as much discussion about it on forums or chat. Whoa. I got some key binding issues here, apparently. All right. Any other thoughts? More security bug concerns if less people are using the text editor. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you know, code rot, bugs, and security issues. That's sort of a corollary to the first one, I think. Astrocat says maybe corpos don't let you install and use it if it's out of fashion. Maybe. I mean, I suppose it's possible that, you know, people would be less likely to be able to use it if many people aren't asking to use it. Egon, sorry about the shifted time. I had to do it because I'm in a different time zone now. Andrew says, the nice thing about Emacs is that it's so old that O'Reilly books from 20 years ago still work. Yeah, it does still work, but they're definitely not the best place to get a modern idea of how to use Emacs correctly, I think. Thomas says, the editor will fall behind in features, leading to more people switching, leading to fewer people to implement modern features. Okay. No new features being added to stay competitive with new editors, or newer editors, let's say. Vedant says, how did you get that transparency effect in your Emacs? There's a variable for that. It's what's it called? If my stuff loads up here. Translucent. Did I type that? No. Frame. Yeah, the alpha property of the frame parameters. You can check out my config for that. Yeah, Andrew says that's why I'm here, for the modern ideas. Yeah, well, definitely part of what we're trying to do here is at least show how you would use Emacs in a quote-unquote modern way, I guess. Distros will drop less popular editors. That's one aspect I did not think about. So might not be packaged anymore in Linux distributions if it's an open source editor to begin with. Let's see. Yeah. And I mean, basically losing new users sort of compounds, I think, because if no new users are coming in, then less people are talking or asking questions about it. So people just sort of drop off the map at some point. Let's see. Not as many new users coming in has a compounding effect on user loss. Or let's say it can have. So yeah, that's a few things that we could say basically are, you know, consequences to losing popularity. However, I wouldn't say, if these are sort of like the criteria for saying that, you know, an editor is losing popularity, I don't think we can say that many of these things are happening to Emacs, because I would say that lately, the actual contributions happening to Emacs itself and also to packages in the community seem to be rising. A lot of stuff is happening. Emacs 28 is going to be a pretty major release compared to, let's say, Emacs 24 or 25 potentially. I think that a lot of really great things are happening, and a lot of long-term problems are being solved, like performance issues, like with the native comp functionality, stuff like that. So you definitely can't say that Emacs has lost popularity to the extent that it is dying, because it's definitely not dying. So really, we still have to answer the question of, does popularity matter? So we can actually add that here. Let's just add that there for later. EBN says, keep in mind that software like Emacs might have a lot higher contributor density than the more popular alternatives. Look at something like NixOS compared to the more popular distributions. Yeah, that's excuse me, that's a good point. It really depends on what the user base is. By the nature of Emacs itself, it encourages people to hack on the internals, because you have to do that to configure it yourself and to solve your own problems. So it promotes people to the level of being able to contribute to the actual code base of the editor. So it's almost self-reinforcing in that sense. So I need to keep that in mind. That's actually a really good point. Let's see, other points. So the type of users can also help keep the editor alive if they can contribute to the project. Okay. Onyx says Nano is not going anywhere. It still comes by default with Ubuntu. Well, that's because you need to have some kind of baseline editor available to do anything in a distro if like you can't boot the window manager or something like that, or the desktop environment. You need to be able to edit files to fix stuff. So something like Nano is always going to be installed by default on the mainstream distributions. Not so on Geeks though. You have to install something yourself, otherwise you're not editing anything. Let's see. Decio says, am I right in assuming visual programming is on the rise with all the low-code platforms? Also, more people in software that never made intensive use of text editors, let alone the more arcane ones. Well, visual programming, I'm not so sure. I know there's been a lot of work on various different visual programming languages over time, and you know, people have gotten excited about various different ones, but it never really catches on as a primary way to write code. I could be wrong though. I mean, if you have logic blocks that can be connected together, many tasks can be automated using that, but there's really no replacement for actually writing code. But like I said, that's just my opinion as a person who hasn't really done much of the visual programming stuff. Also, more people in software that never made intensive use of text editors. That's true. I mean, there's plenty of people who are coming along now who are learning programming, and they may only be using things like, you know, like a language playground on a website. You know, many languages these days, newer languages, you could go to a website and learn how to write code for the language just by experimenting on a web page. Not even in an IDE, just like go to the Go playground or the TypeScript playground, or many languages have this functionality now where you can just go to a website and see examples of code, run them, and learn how to use a language. So yeah, probably they never had to install an editor like Emacs or Atom or Sublime Text to edit code. They could do it just on a website. So generally, over time, I think that we will see the web-based, it's like web, well, what would you even call that? Basically programming in a browser using browser-based IDEs. That's going to be a very common thing, I think. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to do it though, because if you're a power user and you want more control, you're definitely going to want to have it running on your own computer. But Don says, are you a programmer or what is your day job? I am a programmer. Elias says, Emacs distros are a bit confusing. I'm using vanilla Emacs and a bit afraid of pre-packed ones. Well, I would say that, you know, you shouldn't be afraid of the pre-packed ones because they're more configured already. So it might be easier to get started than with vanilla Emacs. But if you're already using vanilla Emacs, there's really no reason to use a different distribution if you don't want to. GNU Ninja says Emacs has a conference built around it. That's popular. Well, Emacs has a conference that is organized by people who care a lot about Emacs and the Emacs community, and they're doing a really good job. I've been very impressed with how they've been organizing this so far. So kudos to all of the organizers of Emacs Conf, because yeah, it's things like that that really matter when it comes to keeping a community alive. Have you noticed that Z Shell uses Emacs key presses for a lot of its functionality in the command line editor? I mean, Emacs key bindings are pretty common in many editors. If you go into Mac OS and go into a text field, I think you can use Emacs style key bindings in text fields. So those have become pretty prevalent, I think, because Readline or the GNU Readline project also had those key bindings. So I think they're pretty common. Srinivas says, in-depth tutorials for each important package would definitely help Emacs. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's happening more now than ever. I'm seeing more and more people start making YouTube videos on Emacs packages, and also there's a lot of people writing blog posts. So I think we're doing well as far as that's concerned. Andrew says, I would not work for a company that enforces the use of a particular editor. It's okay to have an opinion and to evangelize that opinion, but applying force is anti-innovative. Yeah, at this point, I would not work at a company that did not let me use Linux as a day-to-day operating system, much less, not being able to use Emacs. Let's see. Rather Vi than Nano, though. Yeah, I agree with that. But Vi is also not as straightforward because there's literally no help on the screen whenever you use it. Whereas with Nano, they tell you the key bindings for what you want to do at the bottom of the screen. Andrew says Vi used to be the default obligatory editor. Yeah, long time ago, for sure. Vedant says anybody won't be using Emacs if there is an evil mode. Well, that's not true. I think there's plenty of people who, excuse me, come to Emacs from Vim and they use evil mode at first, and then they stop using evil mode and start using the built-in key bindings. I know that this has happened with a few people in the System Crafters community. And I think it's a good idea. If you decide that you don't need evil mode and you would rather use the Emacs key bindings, that's great. I prefer to use them, the evil mode key bindings. Nova says, I can't go back to the normal Emacs key bindings. I love Vim too much to switch. Well, that's a nice thing, I think. You don't have to stop using Vim modal editing whenever you switch to Emacs. Tomas says, correct. In macOS, you can use Control-A, E, F, B, K in browser location bars or in file name input fields. Yeah, that's one benefit to actually learning the default Emacs key bindings for editing and navigation, text navigation, is because you can use it in other places. Minas Mazar says, I've stopped using evil mode. I'm happy with God mode. I haven't used God mode before, but it does make sense, like as a way to keep you from having to continually hold down Control all the time. Excuse me. Gavin says, I use both personally. Yeah, you were one of the people I was thinking of whenever I said people deciding to drop evil mode, but it sounds like you're using both now, which is good. I sometimes use Emacs key bindings in insert mode, but mostly it's I just drop back to normal mode. I probably should use Emacs key bindings in insert mode though, because I'm not so productive when it comes to switching back and forth. Okay, so how much popularity is enough to keep an editor alive? Well, we did mention one thing before. So do people still care enough to set up conferences about the editor? You could say that Emacs is not very popular, but there is a thriving community that's willing to go to the effort of putting together a conference and have many people who want to give presentations at that conference. So I would say that's a good sign for an editor being popular enough to remain alive. Nova says, is there a way to have Emacs replace the terminal editor? I want to have Z shell inside Emacs. Well, you can use like term mode inside of Emacs or vterm, like EBN says. Let's see what else. How much popularity is enough to keep an editor alive? Or I guess, what are the signs that there's enough popularity? So we can make this bold too. Let's see, what else? As far as Emacs is concerned, there's multiple places where you can go chat about it with other people. So plenty of different places where users congregate and chat. Congregate, is that the right way? Yeah, and chat. So let's say like Reddit, IRC, Discord, etc. Probably there's other places too that I'm forgetting at the moment. I mean, I guess you could consider, live streams as another place where people are congregating now. So yeah, like just there being a general daily community communication about an editor, because people care enough about it to come and talk about that thing, then they probably care enough whenever the editor maybe is losing enough popularity or enough users to have an impact on the day-to-day usability of the editor. So, people would be more motivated to possibly jump in and help. Onyx says ease of use and help. So, yeah, probably a lot of this is probably the opposite of some of these items here as well. So, a healthy stream of blog posts or videos that explain how to use it, or at least provide perspectives. Schemako says, I think Closure seems to drive a lot of Emacs use. Like if you read Closure for the Brave and True, the first couple chapters about getting into Emacs. Yeah, definitely Lisp usage is one place where Emacs is pretty strong. Steve says, what about the effects of too much popularity? That's an interesting question, actually. What is the effect of too much popularity? I think that one problem for editors that have extensions that community members can publish is that you just have too many extensions that do the same thing. If you've ever paid attention to the JavaScript community, JavaScript is obviously not an editor, it's a programming language, but there are 15 million ways or different libraries to do the same thing. So if you have a super popular editor, you're probably going to end up with a million different packages to do the same thing. So maybe that's one answer to that question, but it is an interesting question. See you, Christians. Thanks for dropping by. Anders says, showing workflow with Emacs is good. If you're going to use OCaml, then Emacs is a major editor with best support. That's interesting. I would like to do some OCaml again at some point. Whoops. Why did Christian's comment not get added in here? Let's see. So still, how much popularity is enough to keep an editor alive? Let's see. I don't know. I mean, like as far as new users coming in, you can't really quantify how many new users are necessary to keep interest alive. I think what's more important is having users who love the editor enough to evangelize it to other people. And that's one thing that really has never died with Emacs. That sort of... whenever someone really gets into Emacs, it's hard to stop them from talking about it to other people who might be interested. And if you're, someone who is the spouse or significant other of an Emacs user, you've probably heard a lot about Emacs whenever you didn't care at all about hearing about Emacs. So Rostislav says, too much popularity leads to big corp involvement. That is a good point, actually. Yes, I agree with that. We've seen that happen a lot with technology, like open source libraries and things. New Ninja says, the only thing I can see killing Emacs is a huge shift to cloud web-based editing. I really don't think that that's going to stop anything. I mean, the only way that would actually have a problem or cause a problem for Emacs is if, for whatever reason, everybody decided that Chromebooks were the way to go. But I think even on Chromebooks, you can potentially use Emacs. So, I don't know. Let's see. Evangelism, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, evangelism is sort of the idea there. So, users that can't stop talking about it, even to people who don't want to hear it. That's the way I would say it. Andrew says, a good product needs core developers that are able to curate mods. They consolidate the many different mods that do the same thing into one that becomes a default category killer. Yeah. But, in many cases, these things are not, like, I don't think that anybody in the Emacs developer team said Magit is the best package to use for the Git interface, so use that, because there's the built-in VC mode. So I don't know that like in a project like Emacs, if you would have like the actual core developer saying, okay, these are the packages you should use for all of these different parts of your workflow. So I think that it would be more like a community decision. And as we've seen in the Emacs community over, let's say, the last year, you know, people were pretty happy using Helm and Ivy, but then more completion frameworks showed up and people started shifting their attention to Selector and Vertigo, etc. And even with more coming out in the last month, as we saw in the last stream. So I think at least with a more decentralized and super hackable program like Emacs, probably it's more the community and the movements of the community are what's going to define what are the, you know, best practices or packages to use. Srinivas says, I wonder whether Corona thing affected Emacs development. You mean like coronavirus? I would say that if anything, coronavirus probably helped Emacs gain attention because people were bored. I didn't start making Emacs videos until coronavirus happened. You realize that? So I would say there's probably a lot of things that improved in the Emacs world because of coronavirus, just because people were at home, and you know what better thing to do with your time than mess around with your Emacs configuration. So thanks, coronavirus. I'm not really serious about the thank you, that part. Schiamako says, I wonder if it'd be possible to write a web app implementation of Emacs or to do it as a browser extension so that Chromebook users could get it running easily. Well, there is a tool called Emscripten, which can compile a C program to a subset of JavaScript so that it runs in a browser. And I'm pretty sure someone's already done that. Now, that doesn't mean that you should go use the Emacs compiler for the browser, but Emacs compiled for browser Emscripten. But this is a thing that is possible. Can we look for Emacs? I swear I've seen this before. Anyway, if someone has the link to that, then then you should feel free to paste it in the chat. Okay. Andre says, I don't think Magit has been developed and centralized. It's just the best tool. Yeah, basically that's the point. Is like, you know, the community will develop tools and the best ones will rise to the top just because they are good and that many people will use it. Andrew says, to get more Emacs development, we need to boost the level of boredom. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Nova says, I'm looking for a new browser. I don't know what to pick, though. I do like Vivaldi's group tab feature, but it's closed source. People keep bringing up, what is it called? Vieb, V-I-E-B, right? Vim bindings for the web by design. It's basically just another Electron-based browser that is Vim focused. But there's also Qt browser, which I'm using. Gavin says, a big thing that we see more and more is ease of extensibility helps keep programs alive. While Emacs is arguably hard to get started with, it will continue to be extensible. Yeah, because Emacs is basically a programming system or an environment. It basically has infinite extensibility or infinite utility because you can always change it to do whatever you want it to do. It's not really the same for more locked down, strict API editors like VS Code or other editors that only give you a very specific extensibility surface. Andrew says the problem with browser-based editors is getting the location and permission to store the files. Well, I think these days you don't even store files on the local machine anymore. Everything gets stored in the cloud. Let's see. Gavin says VS Code is extensible, user-friendly, and in the most popular lang out there. Yeah, well, definitely. It's not that hard to write a VS Code extension, but it's not. It requires more of a barrier to entry than Emacs does. That's for sure. For an extension to Emacs, you don't even need to write a package. You could just write a function or set a variable in code, and that's all you need to do. Nova says there's this one I ran across called Nixt. Yeah, definitely. Nixt, I want to cover Nixt a bit in the near future because I would like to cover some other programs aside from Emacs for a change. It says I mostly use Firefox though because I can run multiple different profiles in different instances at the same time for different purposes. That's one feature of Firefox I haven't used very much, but sounds really useful. The ability to have 2 tabs open that could be logged into the same website with different accounts. That's pretty cool. I like that. Okay, so how much popularity is enough to keep an editor alive? Like, what are some other aspects of health to an editor or its community that don't necessarily depend on it being the most popular editor out there? Ilya says, 5 years ago, I had a paid side job on Upwork for configuring Emacs for a newsmaker. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's one thing I actually find very surprising. I see pretty frequently people wanting to pay someone to help them configure Emacs to do a certain thing. That's kind of interesting if you think about it. How many times do you see that for other editors? Hyder says, back from school, your streams are the only thing to be optimistic for. Well, I hope that's not the case, but thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, excuse me. I've had people ask me about consulting on Emacs, and it just feels kind of weird to me to do that, but maybe I should consider it. Eric says you should have a look at LuaKit web browser. It might be possible to configure it in something like Fennel. Yeah, that's definitely possible. Anders says, was it his you looked for? Not sure. Let's see. What else? Oh, Anders says, did you get the 2 links? Let's see if it showed up somewhere else. No, it didn't show up at all in the chat. Like always, YouTube just eats links immediately. I don't know. You may have to send it to me on Discord later. Oh, here's one. Yeah, I can see why it would throw that link out because it looks like spam. beatboop.xyz/cloudmax. Oh my goodness. That just looks like a what do you call it? It looks like malware link. cloudmax.html. All right, so here's the link. Why is it not just a huge link somewhere that I can just click it? Oh, check it out. What? Okay. Astrocat says I can post links. Yeah, you definitely can. Docker Hub. Okay, never mind. I'm not gonna bother with that right now. But anyway, definitely check that out if you want to see an example of of Emacs running in a browser or in the cloud at least. Thanks, Renavus. Martin says, I also thought about finding someone on Upwork to help me set up stuff, but actually until now figured out how to do it all on my own. Yeah, it's better if you're an Emacs user if you do figure out how to do it on your own, and there's plenty of non-programmers in the world who have used Emacs and figured out how to configure it for their workflow without, knowing how to program. They learned enough Emacs Lisp to do it themselves, and it's definitely better that way because it gives you the ultimate power in being able to craft your workflow to do the tasks that you need to do. It's almost like a superpower because otherwise, in many cases, you have to depend on the software that's written by other people. So Emacs sort of gives you your power back in that it gives you the tools to build what you need for yourself. So if you can learn how to do that, then you're going to be much better off than depending on someone else. Okay, so I think I've thought enough about how much popularity is enough. I'll continue thinking about that, but it's interesting to think about. Let's see. Okay. So the conclusion, does popularity really matter? Yes and no. However, but an editor does not need to be to survive. It doesn't need to be the most popular editor to survive. It only needs users, or dedicated users, I would say, who care enough to keep moving things forward. And like we came up with before, I think that Emacs is in a unique position where the configuration and extensibility interface is so similar to the actual code that is part of the editor in most cases, that if you learn how to configure Emacs really well, you could also contribute to Emacs. You know, people who are shipping packages on, let's say, Melpa or Elpa, those same packages could easily be brought into Emacs as main functionality, as we've seen with things like the transient library that's used in Magit for the little pop-up panels at the bottom. That was something that's been developed in the community for a while by Jonas Bernoulli and the contributors to the project, but eventually it got merged into Emacs 28 as now something that is available for anyone to use. So it's different in the case of Emacs because the same concepts apply to both, you, the individual writing your own code, and also, people writing code that goes into Emacs itself. So a smaller community is not a problem because all it takes is people who actually understand the value of the editor and understand how to configure it to then be promoted to contributors who can actually help keep things going. Now, obviously, there's another part of the code base of Emacs, which is like the C code, which takes care of the low-level details of how Emacs runs on various platforms, and also, the runtime for the Lisp environment. But there's enough people who are interested in that sort of thing and who are long-term contributors that I don't really think that popularity is what matters to keeping that going. It's really just people who are so deeply interested and invested in Emacs who want to learn C or want to code C. I would be one of those people if I had the ability to do it, to actually go and help make that part of it better. So I think Emacs is kind of an anomaly in that situation. It's so highly customizable and in the right ways that enable people to become contributors and to help with the long-term viability of the editor. Also, much of the new functionality that you use comes from third-party packages anyway. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes in box in Emacs, but many of us are using third-party packages that customize a lot of Emacs' own behavior. So it doesn't really depend so much on the editor itself gaining new features, because you can get a new feature tomorrow if someone writes a package that does something cool. So I don't know, it's different than other editors. I feel like the Emacs sort of steps outside of a lot of the rules of the game, and makes it so that popularity isn't as much of a problem. And I'm going to expand on that idea a bit in the talk that I'm going to do for Emacs Conf, so I'm not really going to go into too many details here. But going through this sort of set of things today was definitely helpful for me to sort of get my thoughts together on whether or not popularity matters. And it really only matters if the editor itself is not democratized to the point where anyone can understand how to contribute. I would doubt that many of the popular editors right now have an easy time getting community members who have written a package to also become contributors to the core, mainly because the code in the core of the editor is going to be very different than how you write a package for the editor. So I think that's what matters in the end. Let's see, what are we missing here? Edda says, to be honest, Emacs could be more popular, not just for Emacs' sake, but for the user's sake. A lot of people could benefit from using Emacs. Well, that's true. A lot of people could benefit from using Emacs. But I think that Emacs is the type of editor where you have to be a certain type of person to really understand the value. You have to be the kind of person who wants to do things your own way and be willing to learn how to do it in Emacs, and also to sort of stick around long enough to get comfortable to do it. So there's a lot of sort of prerequisites, I would say, for someone to actually become a really long-term user of Emacs. So I don't think popularity is going to help, because even if more people heard about Emacs, many of those people would not be the type of user who would be successful using Emacs, I think. Let's see. So Gavin says, Dr. Racket is a blessing for the Racket community. Not having to get people into Emacs helps lower the barrier of entry. Yeah, well, that's for sure. I don't think that any programming language or community should have to depend on Emacs being the entry point for people to use it, because Emacs itself is harder to get into. Russell Self says the YouTube stream is breaking. Anybody else having problems? GNU Ninja says Emacs is Turing complete. Let's see. Imagine it's such candy that I have to remind myself to use a command line once in a while to avoid skill rot. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't really had that problem yet, but I definitely don't use the git command line very often anymore. It's just so fast to use to use Magit for doing a lot of the common activities. Yeah, I really hope that whenever I get my own place in Greece, that the internet is more stable, because it's a little bit unfortunate to have the video flicking out every now and then. All right, so let's see. I think that's pretty much it for the topic for today. But yeah, like, as I've said before, I don't think that Emacs needs to gain popularity. I think that the strength of the community as it is right now is enough. Now, you could say the community shouldn't lose people, but if there's a person who gets sufficiently, sufficiently invested in using Emacs and they learn enough about Emacs, I think it's less likely that they're going to stop using Emacs, because there aren't many editors that allow you to do the same things that Emacs does. You could switch to NeoVim if you wanted to try, something different that might still be pretty configurable, but it's a different mindset entirely. So it's hard to find an editor that has the same exact mindset with better functionality than Emacs. Now, it may be the case that someone eventually makes something like that, but it's very difficult, I think, to accomplish that goal. I mean, I have the interest in trying it one day, but you need to be solely dedicated on that idea to be successful, and it's going to have to take many, many years. So like I said, Emacs is sort of like a one of a kind program, and if you get it and you sort of build your workflow around it, then it's going to be hard to replicate that elsewhere, in my opinion. Etta says, if you think about it, Emacs is good for the type of person that looks for it in the first place. Yeah, I think that probably a lot of people don't know to look for it, but if you hear enough about it from someone else and you're curious and then you try it and then you really understand what it brings to the table, then I believe that you have a chance to find out that you are the type of person for it. Alfonso says, a bit off topic, but do you know if residential internet connections in Greece have data caps like in the US? Don't know. But I never had a data cap in the US. I know there's data caps in Australia and other places, but not in the US that I've seen. But it may be in different states. In the places I've lived, I've never had a data cap before on... I mean, I know mobile has that, but definitely not DSL. Andrew says, writing plugins for IDEs like IntelliJ and Eclipse has a high barrier to entry. Emacs is closer to the level of tweaking. Yeah, definitely it's the kind of tweaking that scales, because you can start by doing very simple tweaking and then gradually build up your skills by doing more complex things. And before you know it, you're writing like full Emacs packages. So I don't know that there are many other editors that can give you that sort of experience. So let's see, Emacs hacking, scales from simple tweaks to building full packages and even contributing to the core. That's another good way to look at it. Sionic, thanks. All right, so yeah, I think it's probably time to wind the stream down anyway. I mean, it's almost 2 hours at this point. So before I go, definitely want to remind people of the links that have been popping up in the chat. If you want to support the channel and the work that I do making videos and streams about Emacs, geeks, etc., check out the links below in the description to sponsor the channel, also to check out the System Crafter store and get a t-shirt or a hat or a hoodie or a coffee cup, that kind of thing. If you're interested in those sorts of things, I think I'll try to do some Black Friday or Cyber Week or whatever kind of sale stuff that happens later this month. So if you want to wait for that and check that out later, you can also do that. And yeah, this week I'm going to try to get a video out. I'm going to try to give myself the freedom to do a video on whatever I'm interested in, because I'm finding I'm having a hard time doing the next Emacs website or org mode website video, just because like my mind's not really in that headspace at the moment. So I'll try to get a video out on something. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but it'll be something that I'm thinking about and I want to make a video on. So we'll see what happens this week. But regardless of that, I'm going to do a stream next Friday because it's a lot of fun, and I'm so happy that you all showed up today to contribute to this conversation. I certainly appreciate it. Andrew says, now I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm about to go eat a lot of delicious grilled meat, so I'm very excited about that. Cool. So thank you all so much. Yes, Azure Cat says it's definitely hoodie season. Absolutely. I've been wearing my System Crafters hoodie very, very often. Thank you so much, Rostislav, for the 5 and super chat. I really appreciate it. A repeat donation from last week. I really appreciate it. So anyway, thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I enjoy this so much to be able to chat with all of you and catch up every week. So thanks a bunch. And until next time, thanks so much for watching and happy hacking. We'll see you. And now you get to see my OBS screen while I shut down the stream.